vulnerability to international economic events.
Question number 2, the Right Honourable Winston Peters.
This question is to the Minister of Finance. Does he agree with the New Zealand Manufacturers and Exporters Association, the International Monetary Fund and the Reserve Bank of New Zealand that the New Zealand dollar is overvalued?
The Honourable Bill English.
Mr Speaker, we do agree with the level of discomfort about the high level of the New Zealand dollar, but certainly do not agree with the view held by the Manufacturers and Exporters Association that the New Zealand dollar should be devalued to 60 cents US. This would amount to around a 25% devaluation, implying an exchange rate against the Australian dollar of just 58 cents. So if we think there is and that means a drop in income and living standards across the board in New Zealand of about 20%. If they think there's a gap between us and Australia now, then following the Manufacturers and Exporters Association of a 25% devaluation, that gap would widen into a chasm and thousands of New Zealanders would be leaving for Australia because of its much higher standard of living.
The Right Honourable Winston Peters.
Does he agree with John Whaley, CEO of the New Zealand Manufacturers and Exporters Association, that the overvalued dollar has cost the export sector up to $10 billion over the past 3.5 years?
The Honourable Bill English.
Mr Speaker, no, I don't agree with that. We do agree that the high level of the exchange rate does put a lot of pressure on exporters. The government is taking every measure it can to exercise its indirect influence on the exchange rate to help our exporters be more competitive. But we do not agree with the view of New Zealand First, the Exporters Association and the Labour Party that the New Zealand dollar should be significantly devalued. That would cut the incomes and the standard of living of all New Zealanders.
The Right Honourable Winston Peters.
Will he acknowledge that the overvalued dollar is contributing to rising unemployment, with hundreds of jobs being lost in the export sector every month? For example, the 100 jobs recently lost at TY Point, the 120 redundancies at Solid Energy's Huntly East mine, and the 100 jobs set to go at the Kawarau mill, or the up to 400 jobs which hang in the balance at Spring Creek, all because of an uncompetitive exchange rate.
The Honourable Bill English.
Well, Mr Speaker, all of those job losses are regrettable but probably unavoidable. What we owe to the people who have lost those jobs is to continue to support the many businesses which are creating jobs. In the last 2 years, this economy has created 50,000 net new jobs, and over the next 4 years we expect about another 150,000 net new jobs. In an environment of relatively low growth rates and grumpy growth, some companies will be shedding jobs. Other companies are growing jobs.
The Right Honourable Winston Peters.
Is it correct that under Section 17 of the Reserve Bank Act, the Minister of Finance may, for the purpose of influencing the exchange rate or exchange rate trends from time to time by notice in writing to the bank, direct the bank to deal in foreign exchange within guidelines prescribed by the Minister in the notice, which is not certainly you, because you've got no experience whatsoever in this area?
The Honourable Bill English.
Mr Speaker, yes, the member is correct about what's in the Reserve Bank Act. However, it would be irresponsible of any Minister of Finance of New Zealand to instruct the Reserve Bank to try and achieve what he and the Labour Party and the Greens and the Exporters Association want, and that is a 20% devaluation of the New Zealand currency. That would be extremely risky for the New Zealand taxpayer, but worse than that, it would cut the standard of living of every New Zealand household by 20%.
The Honourable David Parker.
If an inflated exchange rate lies at the heart of our exporters' problems, our external deficit and job losses, why won't he do anything about it?
The Honourable Bill English.
Mr Speaker, what lies at the heart of their challenges was the very poor economic policy under the Labor government, where in the first where up to 2008, New Zealand lost competitiveness at a rate among the worst in the developed world. This government is having to work very hard to re-establish that competitiveness.
The Honourable David Parker.
Does he stand by his statement that New Zealand operates, quotes, best practice, close quotes, monetary policy, or does he now accept the economic objectives of the Reserve Bank should be widened to include more than inflation?
The Honourable Bill English.
Well, Mr Speaker, yes, I do stand by the statement, and if the member read the PTA, the Policy Targets Agreement, he would see that it does encompass other economic objectives.
Point of order, the Honourable David Parker.
My question was whether the economic objectives of the Reserve Bank, which are actually laid out in statute, should be widened to more than inflation, and the Minister hasn't addressed that part
I'll allow
of the
the
question.
member to repeat his question if there's uncertainty over the Honourable David Parker.
Does he stand by his statement that New Zealand operates best practice monetary policy, or does he now accept that the economic objectives of the Reserve Bank should be widened in the statute to include more than inflation?
Order, before I call the Minister actually answered the first part of that question. It's a shame the member didn't restrict his question just to the last bit if he wanted that answer, but the Minister answered whether he stood by no order. I gave the member the benefit of the doubt. I should have trusted my initial judgment. Supplementary question, is it the Right Honourable Winston Peters?
In the light of the Minister's first answer, and given that he does have the power to do something about the overvalued dollar, when will he stop Nero fiddling whilst New Zealand manufacturing, New Zealand exporting and New Zealand jobs continue to burn?
The Honourable Bill English.
Well, Mr Speaker, as I've already said, the government is working across a wide range of fronts, from infrastructure to skills, to supporting exporters in our export markets, to sorting out the allocation and use of our natural resources, all as mechanisms to assist the competitiveness of our exporters. However, we do not intend to pursue a devaluation of the New Zealand dollar that would cut the living standards of New Zealand households by 20%, as advocated by the opposition parties.
Question number 3, the Leader of the Opposition, David Shields.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. To the Prime Minister. Does he stand by his statement in relation to food in schools that